welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. If you are new, hi, I'm Cora. Check out the description box below for links to all my social accounts as well as my website, corashay.com. And let's jump into the video because today is part 2 of my wedding planning series, and it's going to be all about picking a venue. I want to talk about the process that we went through and what I've learned throughout the years. I mentioned in my last video, I've worked in the hospitality and event industry for years. My mom was a wedding photographer, and then I worked at hotels with event centers. Long story short, I have seen a lot of the behind the scenes of how people choose venues, and now that I have gone through the process myself, I want to talk about things that I've learned and things I wish I would have known sooner. So the very first part of picking a venue is going to be making sure that you have a budget. I don't want to go too much into depth about creating your budget. I recommend getting a planner. I talked about that a lot in my last video. I'll link that below. The Erin Condren Wedding Planner book is what I'm using, and it has a budget pages in it where you can go through and, look at your total budget and then break that down into different areas of your wedding. But that is going to be essential for picking your venue. You need to know how much your overall budget is, and then that's going to help you determine the next step, which is your guest list. You need to have some form of an idea of what your head count and your guest list is going to be before you can start looking at venues. Because the range and sizes of venues is absolutely insane. You can get venues that are tiny and they fit 50 people, and then you can get huge venues with 300, 400, 500 people. You need to figure out an idea of what your head count is going to be. And I know that can be hard, especially since you need to book your venue so far in advance compared to even sending out your save the dates. But getting an idea, I recommend getting like a plus or minus 50, unless you're doing a really small wedding, in which case you'll need a better idea of what your head count is actually going to be, because you don't want to run into a situation where you book a venue that's unnecessarily large and you're paying a lot more for the actual event space, and then you don't want to find yourself in a situation, which is arguably a lot worse, of you have too many people say yes and you literally don't have some room for them. You're over the capacity of the venue. So before you even start looking at venues, you don't want to get your heart set on one that's going to be way too big or way too small. You want to get an idea of your guest list and then look at venues that fit within there. In general, the advice I've always seen is a small wedding is under 50, a standard wedding is anywhere from 50 to about 125, and then over 125 is a large wedding. Obviously, different places will have different numbers on there, but that's the general realm. We knew from our first initial brainstorming guest list that we were definitely going to be in the medium range and get a very good idea. We were able to sit down and say our best guess is a certain amount of guests, and I recommend you try and figure that out too so that you can get an idea. And in general, if you're choosing between two venues and you can afford both of them, they both work in the budget. Let's say that you think you're going to end up with 100 guests and the one venue can only fit 100. Like, that's their max, and the other venue can fit 150. I'd recommend going with the one that can fit 150, because what happens if more people say yes or somebody else gets added to the list or whatever it may be. Give yourself a little bit of cushion room is better. That way that you don't have to hurt feelings or deal with complications if more people RSVP than you are planning for. First, figure out your budget, figure out your guest list. That's going to be huge for narrowing it down. I know it can be difficult when you fall in love with the venue, but having to kind of backtrack and figure out your guest list based on your venue can be difficult. It can lead to hurt feelings. It can lead to broken budgets. Sometimes it can be very helpful with your families. I've seen this not from our own experience, but from working in the event side of it. I've run into brides where I worked at a venue that had capacity for almost 300, and brides would come in saying we only have a budget for 150, and that's fine. But then their family sees that 300 cap and starts adding people to the guest list that they don't actually have the budget for to pay for their meals. You're looking a lot of times at $100 to $150 a head, all in, for the cost of a person coming in. So by picking maybe a medium to a smaller size venue, you can limit that, and you can say to your family, we literally cannot invite these people. There is not physical room for them. You want to consider all of those factors before you announce your venue or before you even pick your venue. Think about what is going to work the best for your guest list and for your family and for your budget. So the next part is much more fun, and that is to make an inspiration board. So go through, not just on Pinterest, but look at wedding blogs and Instagram as well, because you're going to get a lot more modern current trends than Pinterest. Pinterest, the lifespan of a pin is closer to 5+ years, so you could be seeing stuff that was from 5 or more years ago. So Pinterest has the most supply, but also look on wedding blogs and Instagram. Make a vision board, start to get in a general aesthetic of your wedding, especially if you don't already know the terms that you want to use. So for me, that was the situation I was in. I felt like I only was really seeing rustic themes and boho themes everywhere, and I didn't really want either of those. And so I started to piece together individual images that I liked from different real life weddings, and then it started to give me an idea that I wanted kind of industrial meets modern, but with like light and airiness to it. I made a vision board, even thought of looking for those two elements, because I wasn't totally sure what I wanted before I made that vision board. So if you're in that situation, and especially if you don't know exactly what you want, highly recommend doing that, and then trying to look at venues in your area that match up with your vision board. Some people have a very strong vision going into their wedding. They really want a certain style. They really want a certain thing. I know a lot of brides who know exactly the type of venue that they want. It's awesome if that's you, but if that's not you and you're more like me and you're like, I don't know, I like everything, or I don't like certain things, I don't know exactly what I want, vision board can be so helpful for narrowing that down. So the next thing you're going to do is look through your vision board, look at your budget, put that all together and make a list of venues that you're interested in, and then of course reach out to those venues. If at all possible, touring them is obviously something I recommend doing. I know that the pandemic is how it is right now. Where I live, basically every venue, all but one venue, was doing some form of actual physical tours, of course, with safety precautions in place. You might need to do a virtual tour depending on the venue, so just be mentally prepared for that. That aside, you're going to want to go through, and you're going to, of course, when you get to the venue, start envisioning your wedding and looking at things and thinking about how it's going to fit with your style and the things. And then you also want to think about logistics. You want to think about, do you have maybe a lot of people in your family and the people that are going to be attending your wedding that need an accessible venue? Is your venue accessible? Are you going to be getting married in maybe a farm situation where they're going to have to walk half a mile with no road, so they'll have to walk it to get to your ceremony? Is that going to be feasible? Do your wedding and do what you want, but also think about the logistics. I looked at a venue that only had one bathroom, one total stall per gender. So there's 2 stalls total. And looking at the size of our guest list, I was like, that's not going to be feasible. People are going to be drinking, they're going to be having fun. That's not going to work. Think about the logistics, even if some of that isn't as fun. When you're touring the venue, you're going to be looking at, oh my gosh, there's going to be gorgeous pictures there, and that's going to be wonderful, and I can put the cake there, and you think of the fun stuff, but you also need to think about the logistics. Another big logistic that I think that you should take into consideration is if your venue is outdoors, what is the rain contingency plan? What happens if it starts like torrentially thunderstorming? Where are you going to get married? For me, I needed to know that there was a rain contingency. For the venue that we ended up selecting, they were just going to flip what will be the dance floor. Rather than just already having the dance floor and the table set up in the area that will be the dance floor, they can set it up to have a ceremony, and it's super nice, it's super pretty, and it'll work great. That is something I needed to know. Do not be afraid to ask those kind of questions to the person touring you. It's probably either an event coordinator or somebody on their sales team. Ask them those questions, ask them how they handle it, ask them how they handle different situations. You're going to want to ask kind of those tough questions to them, because you're going to be paying them a lot of money, and you need to know that you can trust them to handle things like a thunderstorm out of nowhere. The next thing that you need to consider when you're booking the venues is how inclusive or DIY you want the venue to be and how much they actually are. So if you have this idea of bringing in everything yourself, you need to make sure that you confirm with the venue that you can do that. A lot of venues will charge you what's called a plating fee, and sometimes they can be insanely high if you want to bring in your own caterer and not use their in-house or somebody on their preferred list. You need to ask those questions. You need to make sure that there's not going to be a massive plating fee, and you need to ask what the plating fee is, because sometimes it's $5 a person, which could be totally worth it to you to bring in your dream caterer, or sometimes it's like $70 to $100 a person. If you're already paying $100 a person for their catered food, and that's another $100 for a plating fee, $200 is probably not worth it. But if you're totally bent on bringing your own caterer in, then that's probably not the right venue for you. Figure out how much you want on that. There are venues that have really strict policies on what decor you can and can't bring. It is very common, at least where I'm from, to have venues that don't allow any glitter. So if you really want to have lots of glittery decor, then you need to probably find a more open, DIY friendly venue that's going to let you bring in those things. But if you're somebody who doesn't want to deal with that and you want a venue that is already very decorated, and or a lot of times the more like inclusive, all-inclusive venues will have decor closets that you can just select from the decor, and you're going to want to figure out what works the best for you. For us, as we looked at different options, we decided ultimately it was going to be a lot easier to have a more all-inclusive venue, because we have, like I said, all of our families coming from out of town. That being said, make sure that you do book your venue and start looking at venues and getting ideas of venues far enough in advance. In general, you're going to hear people say to book your venue right away. And I agree with that. Be aware that times are crazy right now, and that don't stress yourself out, but also get on top of it and make sure that you're figuring out what works for you. Being aware that you might find a venue that you absolutely love and they won't have any availability. Be flexible with your availability if at all possible. If you really want a certain venue, you might have to accept that you might have really wanted to get married in June, but they only have May and July dates. What are you willing to compromise on? I recommend trying to figure that out as soon as possible with your fiance. Figure out, are you really bent on a certain month, or are you more bent on the venue? Things like that. If you have a very specific date and you're only willing to have one date, you're probably going to have to be more flexible in the venue. Or you could get lucky, who knows? But have those conversations in advance. I recommend really communicating those with your fiance and anybody else who's involved, parents, anything like that, and trying to figure that out as soon as possible. Another thing that I want to point out here is to make sure that you get a good vibe from the venue. We had a venue that we had reached out to when we started looking that didn't respond to us for over a month to ask us, okay, let's set up a tour. And I was like, but it's been a month. To me, that is concerning. To me that says, at that point we'd already booked a different venue because we hadn't heard back from them. And at that point, it makes me feel like, are you going to be communicating with me when it's closer to the wedding? Is it going to be a month before the wedding and I'm trying to ask you a question, and are you going to wait until the wedding day to respond to me? That makes me nervous, since I was literally in those shoes. I know that there's crazy things can happen, but a month is far too long. It gave me bad vibes about that venue. It made me really nervous. I wouldn't feel comfortable booking with that venue. It is important to me that they were communicative and they were staying on top of things and that they're going to answer my questions. That was something that was really important to me. You're going to spend a lot of time with the people at your venue on the day of your wedding, so making sure that you mesh well with them is going to be an important part. I apologize for her rambling this, but the final thing I want to talk about is making sure that you know the total costs of your venue. So some venues are going to have minimums. Ours does. That is not abnormal at all. If you're not used to the industry, you might be like, what the heck is minimum? That is the minimum spend total. You need to figure out what that minimum includes. If you have an all-inclusive venue like us, does that include things like your DJ and your florals? But it may not. A lot of times it is just a food and beverage minimum. You need to figure that out, because if, let's say it's a 200-person venue, but they have a $25,000 food and beverage minimum, that's going to be a lot on each individual person, and you're going to have to really think about how that works with your list. If you only planned on inviting 150, that's going to be a lot to spend on each individual person. Are you comfortable inviting more people? Do you have more people to invite? That would make sense. You want to figure that out in terms of a minimum and minimum spend. And then if they don't have a minimum, you need to figure out if that's still the most logistical for you, because a lot of times venues that don't have a minimum have a very high actual rental fee of the venue, and sometimes that isn't worth it. If you don't plan on having a certain amount, or you plan on having a lot of people, a lot of times going with a minimum actually works better. If you're going to have a larger venue or larger guest count, you just want to look at the total costs, and if there's a minimum, what does the minimum include? And if there's not a minimum, what does the rental cost include, and what are they? Do they have a preferred vendor list? And if you don't go on that list, are they going to charge you plating fees? Things like that. Try to get as good of an idea of what your bill is actually going to be up front, and figure out what that includes and what that doesn't include, because you don't want to risk it just blowing your budget out of nowhere because you didn't account for a plating fee. You didn't realize that their drink package didn't actually include alcohol. I've seen that happen before, where they're like, okay, it's $10 per person for drinks. Okay, cool. Oh wait, that's literally just for water, coffee, and pop. Make sure you figure out, and then a lot of times, the basic tier of the drink package might just be beer and wine, but you really want to have cocktails. But now that's $40 more a person. That can blow your budget. Make sure you know the details. If they are being weird with giving you details, that is a red flag. Make sure that they are willing to, if you say, this is how many people we have, these are all the things that we want to include, what is that cost going to be? If they're like, oh, it'll just depend, and they won't really give you a number, red flag. Red flag. You want to know an idea of what everything is going to cost total. So guys, I am sorry that this was kind of rambling on all over the place. I am sure there was more things that I wanted to say when I was thinking about this video, but so that it's not 50 hours long, I'm going to cut it off here. I hope everyone is having a great day. If you are also a bride-to-be, comment below what your wedding date is and where you are in the wedding planning process. I'd love to connect with other brides, so I hope that you add those comments. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day and staying safe out there. Bye guys.